So, what is sex trafficking? Sex trafficking is the modern day slavery. Typically, this is to attain some type of labor or commercial sex, and it's $150 billion industry right now. But it's a hidden crime because a lot of victims have a lot of barriers against them because, in a sense of mentally and physically, because physically they have language barriers and they have this fear that of their sponsors, and if they're entailed to any law enforcement actions, this can cause trauma, which prevents a lot of victims to recognize that they are influenced or they are affected by sex trafficking. And typically, sex traffickers look for people who have some psychological vulnerability. This could also include economic hardship and a lack of social safety. So, if you look in the graph on the bottom right, we're gonna look into Africa. As you can see, Africa, there's one country that's red, and this is the countries of origins of where typically the victims as sex trafficking come from. And as you can see in the red, Nigeria, that's the place, that is the country we'll be discussing today. And as I continue on with my presentation, I'll be talking about where these victims go, where these women victims go to, and as you can see, it typically goes to the high in the regions where it's high dark blue. So, sex trafficking in Nigeria. So Edo State has the highest rate in Nigeria right now, and with women who show low social economic status, they are typically the ones who are asked if they want to be if they need assistance to travel abroad, because however, 40% of women are misled by the information that they are told about traveling abroad, because they're told about a luxurious life, job opportunities, possible marital status, and little knowledge of what kind of condition of work that they'll get into. And sometimes they actually believe that the best strategy to move forward in life is to work abroad, and that's why the sex trafficking industry is so successful, because there's a lot of women who have a lot of barriers against them. That's why the industry runs off immigration aspiration and limited legal opportunities. So this is a problem because it affects women's economic rights and security. With globalization, they are seen as objects than individuals because they are giving a service to others through their bodies. They are doing this to seek a better future for themselves, as well as sometimes, as I continue on with my presentation, I will explain how their families are actually involved in the contract that they sign. But however, when women come back to their countries, sometimes their family neglects them or just looks down on them, because when they return, it's a self-providing reproducing organization, because it's mentally corrupting women in a sense that they can't get out of the system, and also it's just making women feel less of themselves mentally and physically because of these barriers. So, like I told you in the beginning of my presentation, we were going to talk about one of the highest places that Nigerian women where they go to, and we're going to talk about Italy. So, 21% of immigrants from Nigeria arrived in Italy in 2016, and 11,000 of them are Nigerian women who become prostitutes. However, in the 1980s, this was the first women who came to Italy. They were actually just they actually were prostitutes, but it was more of an independent thing. They chose to do it themselves. However, in the 1990s, they started having stricter rules and regulations for people to move to Europe, and that's when there was a lot of dependence on loans. So the Italian prostitution market started to think that this was an opportunity, and they promised women with good paying jobs, and if they worked for prostitution, they could actually pay off their debt. However, with Nigerian women who are a part of the Italian prostitution market, they actually get paid the lowest rate in the prostitution market. They typically work in the sub areas or along intercity highways. When I used to live in Italy, when I was in elementary school, just reflecting on just doing the research study on this, I didn't realize that these were women from Nigeria, but occasionally when my family would drive through the highways, these women would be on the side. So I'm going to talk about the process of sex trafficking from Nigeria to Italy. So typically, women get in contact with smugglers. This is often through family friends, and then after getting contact with smugglers, they contact them with a madam. A madam is pretty much their sponsor and the person who will finance their journey. And typically these are women as well. And as you can see on the presentation, it doesn't look as bad for like cost of documents and the cost of travel, but their debt ranges for $40,000 to $100,000, and it can also increase if there was some type of punishment to the women. And like I said earlier, sometimes families are binded into the contract. However, there is an extreme contradictory of how this plays out, because having their daughter being a part of this business is a sense of taking responsibility of providing the family. But if they come back or get kicked out or they get pregnant, their families look against them because it goes against moral and their religious norms. So it's a growing business, especially in Italy and just around the world. So we're going to talk about Italy. There's 18% of women believe that sex trafficking should continue because they believe it does lead to wealth and economic gains for themselves. But the future for the future women, especially girls, they are still vulnerable to sex trafficking because there is a lack of knowledge of sexual transmitted disease, and the fact that there's still poverty, unemployment, and not a lot of access to education. So there's a lack of empowerment for women to recognize themselves as individuals in Nigeria. The lack of participation for women within the economy is what continues to grow this particular business. However, the lack of knowledge of what could happen to women within the market and mentally fit is not recognized either.